Welcome to Live with the League. I'm Emily Kalashewski, Assistant Director of Member Experience and Learning here at the League. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a focused update for you on a couple of important issues happening right now, and we will be covering the following: an update from our state and federal affairs team on the recently introduced housing package, including conversations around preemption and what it could mean for local government, and a breakdown of Governor Whitmer's newly released budget recommendation and what communities should be watching as that process moves forward. We'll wrap up with a few league reminders, including Capitol Conference registration and an upcoming webinar on ADA accessibility requirements. If you're watching live, as a reminder, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat or Q&A box. We'll answer as many as we can throughout the show. Let's get right into it. All right, so we've got three members of our state and federal affairs team with us today: Jen Rigstrink, John Lamacchia, and Dave Hodgkins. There's quite a bit happening, as I'm sure all of you joining us know, from housing legislation in the House to the release of that budget recommendation. So we're going to walk through what our members need to know. John, we understand that legislation has been introduced in the House as it relates to housing. We also have our My Home program proposal out there. For context, can you start us off by providing a lay of the land as it comes to the housing space right now?
Absolutely. A lot has happened in the last several days and continues to happen in real time. I put in my AirPods today so you didn't hear all the dinging in the background of all the emails coming in on this topic as we go back and forth. Um, but do want to just sort of level set with everybody so we understand what's going on. And to do that, I'm actually going to pull back to last year for just a second to remind everybody that after extensive conversations with our board, we decided to be very proactive in the space of housing. We recognize that this is a major issue for our members, and they were really asking us, what a solution could be, right, to address some of the issues that we're facing, which is why, after a lot of discussion, we came out with the MI Home Program proposal. That proposal does a variety of different things, but at its heart, it's really meant to address what we see as one of the biggest problems, which is filling the gap between what it costs to build homes and what people can afford, and ensuring that we get those into homes or rental units across the state in every one of our member communities, and do that in partnership rather than through preemption. Unfortunately, much like we saw in lame duck, where there were several bills introduced, and I know Jen will talk about some of the specifics here in a minute, to preempt local zoning authority, those bills, as we anticipated, are now back. Just this last week on Tuesday, there was a press conference held announcing a 9-bill package that would do a variety of different things, from dealing with dwelling unit sizes, lot sizes, parking, ADUs. And then on Wednesday, 4 of those 9 bills were introduced. And then Thursday morning, less than 24 hours after introduction, and really only less than 48 hours after the package was introduced, they were up in Regulatory Reform Committee. We were prepared to testify, but in the hour and a half committee, about an hour of which was allotted to this particular topic, we did not have an opportunity to. The chair stated very clearly that at the next committee we would be allowed to testify, but our position of opposition was logged at that particular moment in time. Understanding and hearing from our members that this was such a big issue, and knowing how we want to be proactive in this space from a partnership standpoint, we really needed to make sure that legislators understood our opposition and why. And so over the last couple of days, and really in earnest over the last 48 hours, we've gotten to work on asking our members to engage very directly. So many of you on this call today may have seen our action alert over the weekend. You may have also seen it either from SEMCOG or MTA. We've put out a blog, we've reached out to our internal committees, and we've reached out to those that have supported the MI Home program, as well as several other partner groups that we work with. And the response has been tremendous. Tomorrow, we are going to be participating with SEMCOG, MTA, and several local officials at SEMCOG's offices in Detroit in a press event expressing this opposition. And the whole point of what we're trying to do is to talk to people about the importance of local decision making. Yes, we understand that zoning in this particular issue is front and center, and we need to make sure that locals have an active voice in that. We need to make sure that, um, from an elected official standpoint, they can listen to, be responsive to, and engage with their residents and have community-led decision-making processes. Preemption takes that away, right? Preemption really erodes the essence of local governance. It erodes the essence of human scale democracy. We are in the business of making sure as an organization we stand up for local decision makers, which all of you on this call today engage in that process in a thoughtful and a productive way, responsive to your residents. We want to make sure that can continue, whether that be on this issue as it relates to zoning, whether that be whether that relates to any other issue as we think about how we are involved in that local decision-making process. And so we are here to express that. Our members are backing us in large numbers right now, and we encourage you, and I'm sure Betsy can put into the link, the blog that we posted. If you haven't seen this yet, please go read the blog. There's a link there where you can sign up, add your name to the letter of opposition that we are penning with SEMCOG and MTA, and we'll distribute that to Chair Aragona of the Regulatory Reform Committee and its members, expressing your direct opposition to this approach, not only in terms of preempting local voices, but in terms of taking away our ability to have a decision or have a active voice, engage with our residents and how housing looks in our communities.
Thanks for level setting that for us, John. Jen, I want to turn to you for specifics. Like we talked about, like I think all of our members have heard, hopefully in the last few days, because we've been so vocal about this, the House has introduced a package of housing bills. Those are House Bills 5529 through 5532, and we are anticipating some additional bills soon. Can you provide a more specific overview of what was introduced and how these bills do or would impact local decision-making authority?
Sure, Emily. So there is about in the full package, 9 bills proposed, 4 of which been introduced, and as John said, we're in committee. The first 2 are dealing with lot sizes, and specifically mandating that you cannot have a lot or parcel size larger than 1,500 square feet in residential. And so the other 2 bills are more administrative, dealing with the protest petition within the Zoning Enabling Act, and one dealing with your site plan applications and when you can request certain information or additional studies once a site plan has been submitted. There are just a lot of questions in there. Specifically in the bill with the Land Division Act and lot size, the new language contradicts or does not play well with existing language in parts of the act, and just a lot of things that we have questions and concerns about in the site plan review. There's a 60-day shot clock that's implemented, but there's nothing that's really defines when a site plan is complete and that clock begins. Municipalities, depending on the project, have outside reviewing bodies, whether that's MDOT at the state because you're dealing with a state road, or drain runoff and you're dealing with the county drain commission. So there's just a lot more involved in these bills. While simplistic, I would say they cause a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, and really they take out, the biggest thing is the one size fits all. We're not opposed to smaller lot sizes. We're not opposed to different housing types. What we're opposed to is removing the ability for the community to lead, and include their context in what solutions make the most sense and are needed in their communities, because our communities are different. And so that's where the issue really lies. The other bills that we anticipate that the sponsors said were being introduced soon include dwelling size minimums, parking minimums, accessory dwelling units, duplexes. And so, things that we have seen before. And then, like I said, an expansion with some other, but all state mandated preemption. And from what we have been able to figure out, because we weren't at the table in any of these conversations, we weren't asked to be at the table. We tried to get in there, but we weren't asked. And I think we could have helped a lot pointing out these issues. And we also already pointed out a lot of these issues in the previous attempt to go down this path. So that's where we're at. And we'll keep members updated as things progress. Reg reform has not been posted yet for this week. So if it is, it'll be 9 a.m. Thursday morning as its regular meeting time. So we'll keep folks updated if they post and either introduce more bills or decide to have another committee hearing where we hopefully will have the opportunity to testify.
Jen, we did have a question come in through the chat. Do any of these bills require year-round residency? In destination communities, increased housing does not relate to more housing for year-round residents.
No, absolutely doesn't. And specifically in some draft language we've seen for the accessory dwelling unit bill, it says that you can't count ADUs towards your any kind of capacity cap. You can't have any kind of owner occupied language. So it actually strips all of that stuff out that some communities are already using. They're allowing ADUs, but they're trying hard to balance that year round in the seasonal populations.
So from an advocacy standpoint, I know we've been sending a lot of communications out, but how can our members, just remind them if this is their first time joining us or if they need a little extra nudge to get there, how can our members engage if they have concerns about this legislation?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, taking a look at the blog that was posted, it includes a lot of information around, how to talk to your legislators as well as how to get in touch with your legislators. And so you really want to take your community context in these conversations and imposing and telling those legislators, again, it's not about the lot size. It's about mandating that only that lot size or smaller, and explain to them what's been going on in your community with housing. Where are your struggles? What are the updates you have or are in the process of doing? And let them know, because right now everything is being painted with just one wide brushstroke that everybody's doing this wrong, and that's why the state needs to step in and hand these mandates down on locals.
John, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here. One, it is important that your voice be heard, and you cannot underestimate how legislators respond to that at the local level. And then it's important that we multiply that voice. So we would encourage you, because not every single one of our members is on this. Not every single council member from your community is listening to this at the moment, that if you are on board with opposing this legislation, that you share that with your community, share that with your neighboring communities where you have relationships. It's really important that we show that there is opposition here, one, but two, that collectively across the state that we are speaking in a unified voice. Now, I also understand, right, that when we talk about being unified, it doesn't mean 100%. I see one of the questions that came in here is, were there bipartisan co-sponsors on the legislation? There were, right? Housing doesn't tend to be a partisan issue. Housing tends to be an issue, and we agree that needs to be solved. We want to be involved in that process, and there are different thoughts out there about how to do that. The most important thing that we could do is actually come together to have a real conversation in this space and understand how we do this collectively together and in partnership. A state mandate really oversimplifies the problem, and we need to make sure that we don't do that here, that we have real conversations about this. So I do not, I'm not surprised by the fact that there's bipartisan support to try to solve housing. The question really becomes is, how do we make sure, right? How do we make sure that we do this collectively together? And that's why we came out with a proposal, right? That is why we, said it's better to do it together, right? And then address real issues while at the same time still getting some of this important zoning reform that needs to be done to make sure that we do see different housing types, right? Housing is coming in at different price points, but at the same time, we're accounting for high material costs, lack of access to labor in some cases, and other market forces, quite frankly, that aren't driven at the local level and local government has no control over. So this is a collective effort. We want it to be a collective effort because we need a partnership-based solution if we're actually going to be successful in solving our housing problem.
Thanks, John. And I just want to echo something that's come in through the chat, I think just to us that we aren't unified 100%. And that's exactly the biggest advantage of the My Home program. It's a menu of options. So a great comment that's come in through the chat. Thanks, Eric. Okay, well, a lot happening there. And as things continue to progress, as you all have seen over the last week and will continue to see, we're going to keep folks engaged and informed. So just another plug to sign up for that Inside 208 blog for those updates as they come out. You've probably seen our emails anyway coming out as we've done blasts over the last week on this topic. I do want to transition though, because there are some other things happening aside from this housing legislation. Dave, I'm going to come to you next. The governor's budget recommendation is one of the first steps in the state budget process. And we're right in the middle of that right now. Can you walk us through what happens next and what the budget timeline looks like from here?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The governor's budget recommendation is typically but like the first thing that kicks us off. It happens second or third week of February every single year. She presents a comprehensive budget to the legislature. So from there, the legislature will review on their own terms her recommendations. The House and the Senate appropriations subcommittees will review them, and then they will hold hearings and pass their own version of the budget bills before each full chamber will ultimately pass their version of a full budget. That takes place somewhat March through May. It's different every single year, but somewhere around March to May. And then in May timeframe, they will host conference committees. And these are what really gets down to the nitty gritty details of the budget, right? They'll start to do their final negotiations because the Senate and the House will have points of difference that they'll have to figure out. And once they do that, they will adopt those versions in the full Senate and the full House, and they will kick it out to the governor for her to take a look at and sign or make any changes that she wants. Typically, that's supposed to be done by July 1 for a statutory deadline. As we've talked about the past few years, there's really no teeth in that, though. And as we saw last year, that rolled right through July 1st and went all the way past our constitutional deadline of having a budget by October 1st. So as of right now, I don't know that that's going to happen. They are having these conversations, and I know that lawmakers want to get back in their districts since it is an election season and they want to get knocking on doors. So that'll be something to keep in mind.
So it might look a little different this year than last year. And
Yeah.
also, this is a good reminder of why it feels like we just did this, but we're right back in
Yeah.
it because the process was extended last year, let's say.
Yep.
John, you recently posted a blog on Inside 28 breaking down the governor's proposal. So let's get into that specifically. Can you give us an overview of what's in the budget that local officials should be paying attention to?
Well, I promise for those of you that are maybe pulling up the blog right now, I won't go through it in that extent. That's really meant to just be extremely broad-based in terms of the things that are out there. But I will hit on a couple of high-level things that we really care about. But first, the governor's budget this year is $88 billion, or just over $88 billion. It's actually up a little bit from last year. And that may be surprising to some, as you've heard, and I agree, we are in a very, very tight budget and likely will be for a year or two, and hopefully that will change beyond that. But this year it is going to be a tight budget. The reason it's up primarily is twofold. One, new transportation revenue, and we talked a lot about that. That is starting to come online, both from collection of gas tax and from our corporate income tax component, and as we think about the marijuana revenue that's going to be out there. While that hasn't necessarily hit the books officially, the governor does bake that into her transportation or into her overall budget proposal. When we think about estimates there, I know MDOT just released estimates on that. And I know Betsy has those to drop into the chat here. And there are two separate links. The first is a link to the Michigan Transportation Fund revenue. This is money that traditionally comes in off of gas tax and registration fees. And the second link is one that comes from the new Neighborhood Roads Fund, which is made up of the corporate income tax dollars and the marijuana revenue. So you will have to combine those two things. MDOT does not have a sheet that puts it all together, but collectively, those two numbers will give you your estimates based on the most recent knowledge that the department has in terms of what we can project coming to you in this upcoming fiscal year. The other piece that people are most concerned about, particularly the way revenue sharing happened last year, especially around constitutional, is what are the numbers this year? And revenue sharing, as the governor would describe it, is flat. I will sort of give some nuances to that. Statutory, yes, the statutory number is flat, same baseline as last year, although that doesn't account for increasing costs at the local level that are driven by inflationary pressures or wages or healthcare benefits. Constitutional is actually down a little bit. So when you look at the revenue sharing numbers from a projection standpoint, which we can also include in the chat, those numbers actually show an overall decrease in revenue coming into local units of government when you combine constitutional and statutory, down about 1% to 2%, depending on the community. But again, that's largely driven by the fact that we no longer charge sales tax at the pump. And so that $93 million of collective loss is starting to show itself there. Just by comparison, so people are aware, constitutional revenue sharing is just slightly less than where it was in 2022 in terms of total projected collections. And statutory and constitutional combined is roughly on par where we're at in fiscal year 24. So you can count on it from us that we will be continuing to talk about the revenue sharing trust fund. It's important that we continue to talk about legislators in this stabilizing our revenue. But in general, right, we're at a tight budget scenario. While we have new transportation revenue coming in, we do have this flattening of revenue sharing because of some other pressures in the budget. The one final thing that I'll mention, I know many of you have asked about election equipment. We are thankful that the governor has prioritized putting $43 million in the budget to help with locals address that cost as we get through this election cycle and into the next one as we enter 2027.
So, John, a lot happening, a lot of moving parts to what's happening here in Michigan at the state level. So if we're talking specifically about the budget process, is there anything our members need to do to engage in that as it moves forward?
Yeah, I would say be patient and deal with housing first.
Yeah.
But the budget has a long ways to go, and Dave alluded to this. You need to be very cautious in terms of what the governor puts out, to not take that as this is what it's going to look like in its final form. It will go through many iterations, and they will have to negotiate, as Dave said. I think the harder part is as much as we want to work on that timeline, we saw last year that there's no guarantee to that. But it will give us clues along the way. We will be able to communicate, and we will also be able to let you know when the best moments for engagement are based on what we're seeing and what we understand of the negotiations. So whether that be a budget specific item or whether that be something like the revenue sharing trust fund, where we're trying to get policy to maybe move along with it, we'll make sure you stay informed on that.
Thanks, John. All right, one final time. Anything before we close out today and give a couple of reminders unrelated to our legislative stuff, but one final time, what are we asking our members to do right now?
Yeah, the number one ask is to make sure that our members read that blog, consider adding their name to opposition, and then sharing that with your colleagues and with your friends in local government, making sure that we can say definitively that our members do not want to see their local decision-making authority taken from them, and that we want to work in partnership to solve the housing solutions out there, right? We know even the sponsors of this legislation care about solving the problem. You know, we as an organization care about solving the problem. How do we work collectively together to make sure that that happens? That is ultimately what we want to see at the end of the day. But in order to get there, we need to express our opposition first and foremost to these bills before us, and to some that have the desire to remove that local decision-making authority from our officials.
All right. Thanks so much, John. And I want to say a huge thanks to the team. I know you've all been working in overdrive over the last week as all of this stuff has been coming out. Great job. Thank you. And thanks to all of our members for being right alongside us with all of that. Before we wrap up, a few quick reminders. CapCon registration is open. We would love to see you March 10th and 11th in Lansing for our legislative conference. You can find more information, including an agenda with our many great sessions, on our website. We're going to post a link in the chat here. We look forward to seeing you next month in Lansing. And one more upcoming event. Join us next Friday, March 3rd at noon for a webinar on digital accessibility. This session will provide a practical foundation on how digital content is structured, how assistive technology interacts with it, and why formatting choices direct impact usability. If your community manages online content, this is an important and timely conversation to be a part of. We'd love to see you there, and it's free. We've posted that in the chat as well. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Live with the League. Have a great week.